Make me scream your name, Daddy.
The wedding night was supposed to end in blood and obedience, but when Kang Seo-Joon cornered his virgin bride against the silk sheets, weapon in hand and deadly promise on his lips, Melissa did something no one had ever dared. She smiled, leaned closer to the gun, and whispered 3 words that made the untouchable Mafia king's world implode. Make me scream. In that moment, Seo-Joon realized his carefully orchestrated marriage had just become the most dangerous game he'd ever played. The champagne had gone flat hours ago, and the wedding guests had finally left the sprawling estate. Melissa Johnson stood alone in the center of the marble ballroom, her white dress feeling like a cage. She'd been sold. There was no other word for it. Her father's gambling debts had purchased her a one-way ticket into the arms of Korea's most notorious mafia boss. And now, here she was, waiting for her husband to claim what he believed he'd bought. The door opened without a sound. Kang Seo-Joon moved through the shadows like death itself, all sharp lines and controlled power in his perfectly tailored black suit. His reputation preceded him, ruthless, cold, untouchable. Men feared him, women wanted him, and absolutely no one defied him. At 32, he'd built an empire on blood and strategy, and tonight he'd secured another piece of his kingdom through this arranged marriage. "You're still dressed," he observed, his voice low and dangerous as he circled her like a predator. Melissa lifted her chin, her curvy figure silhouetted by moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I wasn't aware there was a dress code for being sold like property." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe, or interest. No one spoke to him that way. "Your father made a deal. You're fulfilling it." "My father is a coward who traded his daughter to save his own skin," she shot back, her heart hammering but her voice steady. "That doesn't mean I have to pretend this is anything other than what it is." Before we continue, I want to sincerely appreciate you all, besties. We just crossed 250 amazing subscribers. Thank you to those who already subscribed before now. You really inspire me to keep creating more videos like this. This tale is about to take you on a wild ride, and I'm creating a community of people who love these stories as much as I do. Welcome to Afro-Korean Films, besties. Kindly show your encouragement by hitting the like and subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me. Seo-Joon stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He was taller than she'd expected, broad-shouldered and intimidating in a way that had nothing to do with the gun she knew he carried. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch, intense, searching, hungry in a way that sent electricity skating down her spine. "You think you know what this is?" He reached out, catching a strand of her long dark hair between his fingers. "You have no idea what you've walked into, little bride." The next morning, Melissa woke alone in an enormous bed, silk sheets tangled around her still-clothed body. Seo-Joon had left her untouched after their tense confrontation, disappearing into another wing of the house without explanation. She should have felt relieved. Instead, something dangerously close to disappointment curled in her chest. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Mrs. Kang, I'm Sun-hee, your personal attendant," a gentle voice called through the door. "I've brought breakfast and your schedule for the day." Melissa opened the door to find a kind-faced woman in her 50s holding a silver tray. "My schedule?" "Mr. Kang has arranged for you to learn about the household operations and meet the staff," Sun-hee explained, setting the tray on a nearby table. "He wants you comfortable here." "How considerate," Melissa murmured, though she doubted comfort had anything to do with Seo-Joon's motivations. This was about control, about making sure she understood her place in his world. She spent the morning touring the sprawling estate, 23 rooms, a private gym, an underground garage, housing a collection of luxury vehicles that could fund a small country. Everything was pristine, expensive, and utterly devoid of warmth. It felt like a beautiful prison. Later that afternoon, she found herself in Seo-Joon's study, a room dominated by dark wood and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. He sat behind a massive desk, focused on documents spread before him, and for a moment she just watched him. In daylight, he was even more striking. Sharp jawline, aristocratic features, black hair perfectly styled. He looked up, catching her staring, and something electric passed between them. "Enjoying the tour?" he asked, leaning back in his leather chair. "It's very—" She searched for the right word. Impressive. Like a museum. Cold and untouchable. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You have something to say?" "I'm just wondering why a man with everything would bother with an arranged marriage at all," Melissa said, moving closer to his desk. "Surely the great Kang Seo-Joon could have anyone he wanted." "Perhaps I wanted someone who wouldn't come willingly," he replied, his gaze raking over her curves in a way that made heat pool low in her belly. "Someone who'd fight me. Why?" He stood abruptly, rounding the desk with predatory grace. "Because everything else in my life is easy, boring, predictable." He stopped inches from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "But you're different. Angry, defiant, real." Her breath caught. "You don't know anything about me." "Then tell me." His hand came up to cup her jaw, thumb brushing across her lower lip. "Tell me why a woman with your fire ended up here. Tell me what you're hiding behind those beautiful eyes." The touch sent electricity through her entire body, and Melissa jerked back before she could do something stupid like lean into it. "I'm not hiding anything. I'm exactly what you see, a woman trapped in a situation she didn't choose." "Liar!" The word was soft, almost affectionate. "But I'll figure you out eventually. I always do." The following week passed in a strange dance of tension and avoidance. Seo-Joon disappeared for long hours, conducting business she wasn't privy to, while Melissa explored her new prison and tried to ignore the way her body responded every time he was near. She'd been trained to hide her past, to play the innocent victim, but something about Seo-Joon made her want to drop the mask. On Friday evening, he surprised her by appearing in the doorway of her room. Yes, they still had separate rooms, dressed in casual jeans and a black shirt that hugged his muscular frame. "Get dressed," he commanded. "Something simple. We're going out." "Going out?" She set down the book she'd been reading. "Where? Does it matter? You've been complaining about feeling trapped. Now's your chance to leave the estate." 20 minutes later, they were in his black Mercedes, cutting through Seoul's nighttime traffic. Melissa watched the city lights blur past, hyper-aware of Seo-Joon's presence beside her, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with controlled strength. He pulled up to a hole-in-the-wall restaurant in a neighborhood that seemed wrong for a man of his status. "You're taking me to street food. The best galbi in Seoul," he said, actually smiling for the first time since she'd met him. "Unless you'd prefer some pretentious five-star restaurant." "No, this is—" She found herself smiling back. Unexpected. The restaurant was crowded and loud, steam rising from grills at every table. Seo-Joon guided her to a corner booth with his hand on the small of her back, a possessive touch that sent shivers through her. They ordered, and for the first time they talked, really talked, about everything except their arrangement. "You studied art history in London," Seo-Joon said, and she realized he'd done his homework on her. "Why?" "Because beauty matters," Melissa replied, watching him expertly grill the meat. "Even in an ugly world, especially in an ugly world, we need beauty to remind us what we're fighting for." His eyes met hers across the table, something unreadable flickering in their depths. "Is that what you think my world is? Ugly? Isn't it?" She held his gaze. "Violence, fear, power games. What's beautiful about that?" "Control," he said simply. "Structure. The knowledge that you're strong enough to protect what's yours and destroy what threatens it. There's a certain beauty in absolute power." "That's not beauty, that's domination." "Maybe I like dominating." His voice dropped lower, taking on a sensual edge that made her pulse race. Maybe I like the idea of having something so completely that it becomes part of me. The air between them crackled with tension, and Melissa found herself leaning forward without conscious thought. You can't own people, Seo-Joon, no matter how much power you have. Can't I? He reached across the table, catching her hand in his. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a touch that felt far too intimate. You're my wife. That means you're mine to protect, mine to provide for, mine to... To what? She challenged, even as her body betrayed her with goosebumps rising on her arms. To keep, he finished, and the raw possession in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it ignited something wild and reckless inside her chest. They ate in charged silence after that, the unspoken tension building with every shared glance. On the drive home, Seo-Joon's hand found her thigh, resting there with casual ownership that made breathing difficult. Melissa knew she should push him away, maintain her distance, but she couldn't bring herself to move. Back at the estate, he walked her to her room but didn't immediately leave. He stood in the doorway, backlit by hallway light, looking at her with such intensity she felt naked under his gaze. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "It was... nice." "Nice." He moved closer, backing her against the wall beside her bed. "That's not the word I'd use." "What word would you use?" The question came out breathier than she intended. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. "Torture. Having you this close, smelling your perfume, watching you smile, and knowing I promised myself I'd give you time." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "You're making me insane, Melissa." Her hands found his chest, feeling his heart pounding as hard as her own. "Seo-Joon, tell me to leave," he whispered against her lips. "Tell me you don't feel this and I'll walk away right now." But she couldn't, because she did feel it. This magnetic pull, this impossible attraction to a man who should terrify her but instead made her feel alive for the first time in years. "I can't." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she'd imagined. Not violent or demanding, but deep and searching, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. Melissa melted into him, her curves pressing against his hard body, and a sound escaped her throat that was part surrender, part invitation. Seo-Joon groaned, his control visibly fraying as his hands tangled in her hair. He kissed her harder, backing her toward the bed, and she went willingly, desire overriding every logical thought. They fell onto the mattress together, a tangle of heated kisses and desperate touches. "Tell me to stop," he rasped between kisses, even as his hands mapped the curves of her body through her clothes. "Because if you don't, I won't be able to." "Don't stop," she breathed, pulling him closer. "Please don't stop." What followed was a blur of sensation, clothes disappearing, skin against skin, whispered words in Korean that sounded like prayers. Seo-Joon was surprisingly gentle despite his fierce reputation, his touches reverent as he explored every inch of her, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into him. And Melissa, dropping every pretense of innocence she'd been hiding behind, matched him touch for touch, discovering that power worked both ways. Later, much later, she lay in his arms, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Seo-Joon's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and she could feel the question building in the silence between them. "You're not what I expected," he finally said. Melissa's heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" "Your father said you were inexperienced, innocent." He propped himself up on one elbow, studying her face in the moonlight. But that was a lie, wasn't it? Fear shot through her, cold and sharp. This was the moment she'd been dreading, the moment everything would fall apart. "Seo-Joon, I don't care," he interrupted, his hand cupping her face with unexpected tenderness. "Whatever you've hidden, whoever you've been, I don't care. All I care about is this, us, now." Tears pricked her eyes. "You don't understand if you knew." "Then tell me." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "Tell me everything and let me prove that nothing will change how I feel. But Melissa couldn't, because the truth was too dangerous, too damaging. So instead, she kissed him again, pouring everything she couldn't say into the touch, and let him pull her back into the heat and safety of his arms. The next morning, she woke to an empty bed and a cold sense of dread. Last night had changed everything, crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. And despite Seo-Joon's reassurance, she knew men like him, men who valued control and power above all else, wouldn't forgive being deceived. She was pulling on a robe when she heard raised voices from downstairs. Moving quietly, she descended the stairs to find Seo-Joon in the foyer, his entire body radiating lethal fury as he faced 3 men in expensive suits. "I don't care what the council says," Seo-Joon snarled. "She's my wife, and she stays." "You were supposed to marry the Johnson virgin to secure the European roots," one of the men argued, "not bed some woman with a past. Do you have any idea what this does to our reputation?" Melissa's blood ran cold. They knew. Somehow they'd found out about her past, about the things she'd done before her father's debts had given her an escape route into this arranged marriage. Seo-Joon's hand moved to the gun at his waist. "Choose your next words very carefully." "The council demands an annulment," another man said, though his voice wavered slightly. "Return the girl, reclaim your investment, and we'll arrange a more suitable." The sound of the gun clearing its holster cut him off. Seo-Joon had the weapon aimed at the man's head in a heartbeat, his face a mask of cold rage. "Let me be crystal clear. Melissa is my wife. Anyone who threatens her, questions her, or even looks at her wrong will answer to me. And trust me, you don't want that." "Seo-Joon, please," Melissa said from the stairs, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror coursing through her. "Don't do this, they're right. I lied to you, and I don't give a damn what you did before you were mine," Seo-Joon interrupted, not taking his eyes off the men. "You're mine now. That's all that matters." The men exchanged nervous glances before slowly backing toward the door. "The council won't accept this," one warned. "Then the council can come tell me themselves," Seo-Joon replied coldly, "but I promise they won't leave alive." After they'd gone, silence filled the massive foyer. Melissa descended the rest of the stairs slowly, her heart in her throat. "You shouldn't have done that. They'll come for you now." Seo-Joon finally holstered his weapon and turned to face her fully. "Let them come. I've built my empire on being underestimated. They think my marriage is my weakness." He closed the distance between them, pulling her against his chest. "They're wrong. You're my strength." "You don't even know what I've done," she whispered against his shirt. "The things I had to do to survive before. I know you're smart, resourceful, and brave enough to do whatever it took to stay alive," he interrupted. "I know you're stronger than you pretend to be. And I know that anyone who tries to take you from me will die screaming." His hand tilted her face up to meet his fierce gaze. "That's all I need to know." "Seo-Joon, no." He kissed her hard, possessive, claiming, "You're mine, Melissa, and I protect what's mine with everything I have." But Melissa knew the danger was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Because the council Seo-Joon so casually dismissed controlled most of the criminal operations in Asia, and they didn't accept defiance, especially not over something as simple as an arranged marriage gone wrong. That evening, Seo-Joon called an emergency meeting with his inner circle, 5 men who'd been with him since the beginning, who'd helped him build his empire from nothing. They gathered in his private office, and this time, he allowed Melissa to stay. "The council is moving against me," Seo-Joon announced without preamble. "They see my marriage as a weakness, a distraction from business." "Are they wrong?" asked Jae-won, his second in command, though his tone was more curious than challenging. Seo-Joon's hand found Melissa's, threading their fingers together. "No, she is a distraction. But she's also the first thing I've ever wanted more than power." He looked at each man in turn. "I need to know now. Are you with me? or will you side with the council? The men exchanged glances before Do-Yun, the weapons specialist, spoke up. We've followed you through wars and negotiations. If you say she's worth fighting for, then we fight. It won't be easy, Seo-Joon warned. The council has resources, connections, politicians in their pocket. They'll come at us from every angle. Good, Seung-Joon said with a dangerous smile. I was getting bored anyway. Melissa watched this exchange, something warm and terrifying blooming in her chest. These men, criminals, killers, the very definition of dangerous, were willing to go to war for Seo-Joon's right to keep her. It was insane. It was romantic in the most twisted way. It made her fall a little bit harder for the man holding her hand. The attack came 3 days later. Melissa was in the garden trying to enjoy the sunshine and pretend everything was normal when gunfire shattered the peace. She hit the ground on instinct, her past training kicking in before conscious thought, and rolled behind a stone bench as bullets tore through the roses where she'd been standing. 4 men in black tactical gear advanced through the garden, weapons raised. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to eliminate the problem. To eliminate her. But Melissa wasn't the helpless virgin everyone thought she was. She'd spent 3 years working undercover in one of London's most dangerous criminal organisations before her cover was blown and she'd been forced to flee back to Korea. She knew how to fight, how to survive, how to kill if necessary. She waited until the first man passed her hiding spot, then struck fast, a sharp blow to his knee, another to his throat, and his gun was in her hands before he hit the ground. The other 3 spun toward her, but by then, Seo-Joon and his men had burst through the garden doors, their own weapons blazing. The firefight was brief but brutal. When the smoke cleared, all 4 attackers were down, and Seo-Joon was striding toward Melissa with murder in his eyes, not directed at her, but at whoever had dared threaten her. Are you hurt? His hands were on her immediately, checking for injuries with desperate intensity. I'm fine, she assured him, though she was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Seo-Joon, I need to tell you something. About my past. About who I really am. He pulled her against his chest, his heart hammering against her cheek. Later. Right now, I need to know you're safe. But later that night, after the bodies had been removed and the security tripled, Melissa finally told him everything. About her recruitment by British intelligence at 21. About the 3 years she'd spent infiltrating London's Korean crime syndicate, gathering evidence, becoming someone else entirely. About the night her cover was blown, the people who'd died because of her, the reasons she'd fled back to Korea and hidden behind her father's gambling debts, and the promise of an arranged marriage to a man who wouldn't ask questions. Seo-Joon listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Say something, she whispered, fear clawing at her throat. Yell at me. Throw me out. Something. Instead, he started laughing, a low, disbelieving sound that built into something almost hysterical. You're a spy. My innocent virgin bride is actually a trained operative who can kill men with her bare hands. Former operative, she corrected nervously. I'm done with that life. I just wanted to disappear, to be safe, to hide, he finished, sobering. He crossed to where she stood by the window and pulled her into his arms. God, Melissa, do you have any idea how perfect you are? Perfect? I lied to you. I've killed people. I'm probably still wanted by half the criminal organizations in Europe. You're exactly what I need, he interrupted, tilting her face up to meet his intense gaze. A partner who understands my world. Someone strong enough to stand beside me, not behind me. Someone who can protect herself when I'm not there. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You're not my weakness, little spy. You're my greatest weapon. You're insane, she breathed, even as hope bloomed in her chest. Maybe. He kissed her softly, reverently. But I'm insanely in love with you, so that seems appropriate. The world tilted. What? I love you, he repeated, stronger this time. I think I started falling the moment you stood up to me on our wedding night. You were so fierce, so unafraid, so real. And every day since then you've burrowed deeper into my chest until I can't imagine existing without you. Melissa's tears fell freely now. I love you too. I tried not to. I tried to keep my distance, to protect myself. But you're impossible not to love. Good. He kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring months of frustrated desire and new understanding into the touch. Because you're stuck with me now, spy wife. For better or worse. Mostly worse knowing your life, she teased against his lips. Undoubtedly. His smile was pure wicked promise. But I promise the benefits will outweigh the danger. They made love again that night, but it was different from their first time. This was slower, deeper, filled with whispered confessions and tender touches. This was two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to face the light together, consequences be damned. The next morning brought news that made Seo-Joon's expression turn to stone. The council had issued an official order. Annul the marriage and eliminate Melissa, or face complete exile from all operations in Asia. It was a death sentence either way. Seo-Joon's empire couldn't survive without the council's support and protection. There has to be another option, Melissa said, pacing his office while he sat behind his desk, fingers steepled in thought. There is. He looked up at her with eyes gone flat and dangerous. We go to war. Against the entire council. Seo-Joon, that's suicide. Is it? He stood rounding the desk with predatory purpose. I've been playing by their rules for 10 years, building my power, making myself indispensable. I control 40% of their weapons trafficking, 30% of their money laundering operations, and I have dirt on every single council member. A cold smile curved his lips. They think they can threaten what's mine? Time to remind them who they're dealing with. This is insane, Melissa whispered, but she couldn't deny the thrill that shot through her. This was the man she'd married, ruthless, brilliant, absolutely unwilling to back down. Welcome to my world, darling. He pulled her against him, his kiss bruising in its intensity. Now help me burn theirs down. The war Seo-Joon declared wasn't fought with guns and explosions, though there were plenty of both. It was fought with information, with pressure applied to weak points, with strategic leaks to law enforcement and calculated strikes against the council's revenue streams. Melissa proved invaluable, her intelligence training giving her insights into patterns and vulnerabilities that even Seo-Joon's experienced men had missed. They worked side by side, late into the night, planning and executing moves that dismantled the council's power piece by piece. And between strategy sessions, they stole moments of heated passion, their connection deepening with every shared victory and weathered storm. 3 weeks into their war, one of the council members broke. Hwang Jun-seo, who controlled the southern operations, reached out with an offer to switch sides. Seo-Joon met with him in a neutral location, Melissa insisting on coming, despite the danger. You're asking me to betray the council, Hwang said nervously, his eyes darting between Seo-Joon and Melissa. They'll kill me if they find out. They'll kill you anyway, Seo-Joon replied coldly. I'm offering you a chance to survive what's coming. Because make no mistake, I'm going to tear the council apart. The only question is whether you go down with them or help me rebuild something better from the ashes. Hwang looked at Melissa. Is he always this intense? She smiled despite the tension. You should see him when he's really angry. God help us all, Hwang muttered, but he agreed to Seo-Joon's terms. With Hwang's defection, the dominoes began to fall. 2 more council members switched sides within the week, then another. The council's unified front crumbled as self-preservation overrode loyalty, and suddenly Seo-Joon wasn't fighting an empire. He was dismantling one from the inside. The final confrontation came on a Friday night in a private club the council had controlled for decades. The remaining 4 council members sat at a large table, facing Seo-Joon, Melissa, and the 3 defectors who'd chosen his side. The air crackled with tension and barely suppressed violence. "You've made your point," said Kim Won-shik, the council's de facto leader. "You're powerful enough to cause damage. Now let's negotiate terms." "No negotiations," Seo-Joon replied flatly. "You threatened my wife. You sent assassins to my home. You gave me a choice between my empire and the woman I love." He leaned forward, his expression pure ice. "You made this personal. So here's my offer. Retire. Quietly, immediately. Turn over your operations to my oversight, and I'll let you live out your remaining years in peace." "And if we refuse?" another council member demanded. Melissa spoke up for the first time, her voice cutting through the tension. "Then I release the files I've compiled on every illegal operation you've run in the last 10 years, complete with financial records, communications, and evidence that will have Interpol kicking down your doors by morning." She smiled pleasantly. "Your choice." Won-shik's face turned purple with rage. "You can't. She can," Seo-Joon interrupted. "And she will, because that's what happens when you threaten a trained intelligence operative." His hand found Melissa's under the table, squeezing gently. "She's been 3 steps ahead of you this entire time." The council had no choice but to accept defeat. One by one, they signed documents transferring their operations to Seo-Joon's control, effectively making him the most powerful criminal figure in Asia. When it was done, Melissa and Seo-Joon walked out of that club as king and queen of an empire they'd won together. In the car on the way home, Seo-Joon pulled her onto his lap, kissing her with desperate intensity. "You're incredible," he murmured against her lips. "Absolutely incredible." "We're incredible," she corrected, running her fingers through his hair. "Together." "Together?" he agreed. Then, to her shock, he produced a small velvet box from his pocket. "I know we're already married, but I want to do this right. Melissa Johnson, will you marry me again? This time not as an arrangement, but as a choice. My choice. Your choice. Ours." The ring was stunning, a perfect diamond surrounded by sapphires the colour of his eyes. Melissa's vision blurred with tears. Yes. God, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that promised forever. The second wedding was everything the first hadn't been, a celebration of love rather than obligation. They held it at a private beach resort in Jeju Island, away from the empire they'd conquered, away from the blood and strategy that had brought them together. Just 50 guests, Seo-Joon's inner circle, a few of Melissa's old friends who'd survived her intelligence days, and Sun-hee, who cried through the entire ceremony. Melissa wore a dress she'd chosen herself, soft ivory silk that hugged her curves and flowed like water when she moved. Seo-Joon couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle, and when she reached him, his hands trembled slightly as he took hers. "You're shaking," she whispered, surprised. "You terrify me," he admitted quietly so only she could hear. "The thought of losing you, of anything happening to you, it's the only thing in this world that scares me anymore." Her heart melted. "You're not losing me. Ever." The vows they exchanged were simple but profound, promises to stand together against whatever came, to protect each other, to choose love even when power demanded otherwise. When Seo-Joon kissed her, sealing their renewed commitment, the small crowd erupted in applause, but Melissa barely heard it. Her entire world had narrowed to the man holding her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. The reception stretched into the evening, with music and dancing and more happiness than Melissa had felt in years. She watched Seo-Joon laugh with his men, saw the way they respected him not just as a leader but as a friend, and understood that beneath the ruthless exterior was a man capable of incredible loyalty and love. Later that night, alone in their beachfront suite, Seo-Joon made love to her with reverent intensity. Every touch was a prayer, every kiss a promise, every whispered word in Korean a confession she understood even without translation. They moved together in perfect synchronization, Two people who'd fought their way through darkness to find light in each other. Afterward, lying tangled in silk sheets with moonlight streaming through the windows, Melissa traced patterns on Seo-Joon's chest. What happens now? Now? He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. Now we build something better. The empire is ours. No more council. No more playing politics with people who'd betray us at the first opportunity. We make our own rules. That's a lot of power for two people. Then we'll share it carefully. He rolled to face her fully, his expression serious. I want to legitimize some of the operations. Invest in legal businesses. Create something sustainable that doesn't require constant violence to maintain. Melissa studied him, seeing the vision taking shape behind his eyes. You want to go legitimate? Not entirely, he admitted with a slight smile. Some things will always exist in the shadows. That's the nature of power. But I want our children to inherit something more than blood money and enemies. Her breath caught. Children. Eventually. His hand moved to rest on her stomach, the gesture possessive and tender. When you're ready. When the empire is stable enough that I can protect you and them without question. The next few months were a whirlwind of reorganization and consolidation. Seo-Joon systematically restructured the operations he'd inherited from the council, shutting down the most violent and destabilizing ventures while expanding into legitimate real estate, technology investments, and private security firms. Melissa worked alongside him, her analytical mind and strategic thinking proving invaluable as they navigated the dangerous transition from pure criminal enterprise to something more complex. But not everyone was happy with the changes. 6 months after their beach wedding, trouble arrived in the form of Park Tae-yang, a former council enforcer who'd built a small but loyal following among those who resented Seo-Joon's new direction. He's rallying support, Jae-won reported during a morning briefing, claiming you've gone soft, that the woman has weakened you. Seo-Joon's expression darkened dangerously. Where is he? Moving through the southern territories recruiting, he's promising a return to the old ways, maximum profit, minimum ethics. Melissa felt Seo-Joon's hand tighten on hers under the table. How many? Maybe 200 men. Enough to cause problems if he decides to make a move. Then we move first, Seo-Joon decided. Set up a meeting. I'll remind Park why the old ways died for a reason. But Melissa had a different idea. Let me talk to him. The room went silent. Every man turned to stare at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. Absolutely not, Seo-Joon said flatly. Think about it, she pressed, squeezing his hand. If you go, it's a show of force. You'll have to kill him or humiliate him, which just creates martyrs and resentment. But if I go alone, it sends a different message. What message? Seo-Joon demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled anger at the very idea of her putting herself in danger. That I'm not some weakness to exploit, that I'm your partner in every sense, and anyone who thinks they can use me against you is dead wrong. She held his fierce gaze. Trust me. He looked like he wanted to argue, to lock her in their bedroom and handle this himself. But finally, after a long moment, he nodded. You take Do-hyun and Sung-jun. Hidden, but close enough to intervene if things go wrong. Deal. 3 days later, Melissa walked into a dingy warehouse in Incheon, where Park had agreed to meet. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, handsome in a rough way, with the kind of cocky confidence that came from limited experience and unlimited ambition. Mrs. Kang, he greeted, looking her up and down with obvious appreciation. Or should I call you Melissa? I hear you prefer to be more informal. Mrs. Kang is fine, she replied coolly, stopping a few feet away. Thank you for meeting with me. How could I refuse such a beautiful invitation? He circled her slowly and she tracked his movement with the calm of someone trained to handle worse threats before breakfast. You know, everyone talks about how Seo-Joon has changed since marrying you. Softer. More careful. less willing to do what needs to be done. Is that what you think? I think a man who lets his wife fight his battles has already lost, Park said bluntly. The old council would never have... The old council is dead because they underestimated Seo-Joon, Melissa interrupted, just like you're doing now. She moved closer, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. You want to know why he sent me instead of coming himself? Park's eyes narrowed. Why? Because he knew I could handle you without him having to get blood on his hands. In one smooth motion, she pulled the small pistol from her jacket and aimed it at his chest. And because he respects me enough to let me prove that anyone who sees me as a weakness is a fool. Behind her, she heard the telltale sounds of a dozen weapons being drawn and cocked. Park's men had been hidden throughout the warehouse, and now they emerged, surrounding her. Park smiled, confident again. You walked into a trap, Mrs. Kang. Did I? Melissa smiled back, completely unafraid. Do-hyun, would you like to show Mr. Park what an actual trap looks like? Red laser sights appeared on Park, and each of his men simultaneously. Sniper dots from positions throughout the warehouse that they'd secured hours before the meeting. Seo-Joon's voice echoed through a speaker system. Every one of your men has a rifle trained on his head. You have 3 seconds to put down your weapons before I turn this warehouse into a tomb. The change in Park's expression was almost comical, from smug confidence to pale fear in a heartbeat. His men looked to him for guidance, finding only a man who'd badly miscalculated. You have a choice, Melissa said calmly, her gun never wavering. Join us, accept the new way things work, and prosper. Or keep fighting and die here where no one will ever find your body. She tilted her head. I really don't care which you choose, but make it quick. My husband gets impatient when people threaten me. Park's weapon clattered to the concrete floor. One by one, his men followed suit. Smart choice, Melissa said, lowering her own gun. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to work for us, legitimately. We have a new private security firm that needs experienced personnel. You'll be trained properly, paid well, and given a chance to build something that doesn't end with you in prison or dead. And if I refuse? Seo-Joon's voice came through the speaker again, cold and final. Then my wife shoots you and we find someone else. You're cool. Park swallowed hard, looking between Melissa's calm expression and the laser sights still painting his chest. I accept. When Melissa returned to the car where Seo-Joon waited, she found him pacing like a caged animal, his entire body vibrating with suppressed tension. The moment he saw her, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Never again, he said roughly against her hair. I don't care how good your plan is, you're never walking into something like that again. Seo-Joon. No. He pulled back enough to cup her face and she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Watching those cameras, seeing you surrounded, knowing that if anything went wrong, I'd be too far away to protect you. His voice cracked. I can't lose you. I won't survive it. Melissa's heart squeezed at the raw vulnerability in his expression. This powerful, dangerous man was completely undone by the thought of her in danger. You're not going to lose me, she promised, kissing him softly. I'm right here. I'm always going to be right here. He kissed her back desperately, pouring months of fear and love and possession into the touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. Marry me again. She laughed, the sound slightly watery. We're already married. Twice. Then let's make it 3, 4, 100 times. His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I want to marry you every day for the rest of my life. You're ridiculous. I'm in love. He kissed her again, softer this time. There's a difference. The Park situation marked a turning point. Word spread quickly through the remaining underground networks. The Kangs weren't to be trifled with. And Melissa wasn't some decorative weakness, but a force to be reckoned with in her own right. Opposition to Seo-Joon's new direction dried up almost overnight, and the empire stabilized in ways he'd never imagined possible under the council's regime. 2 months later, Melissa woke feeling nauseated. At first, she blamed it on the rich dinner they'd had the night before, but when the feeling persisted for 3 days, she quietly made an appointment with a doctor. The pregnancy test came back positive. She sat in the doctor's office, staring at the results, feeling a complex swirl of emotions. Joy, certainly. She and Seo-Joon had talked about children, had agreed they wanted them eventually, but also fear. Bringing a child into their world, their dangerous, complicated world, seemed almost irresponsible. "Mrs. Kang?" The doctor's gentle voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Is everything all right? This is good news, yes?" "Yes," Melissa said quickly. "Yes, it's wonderful. I'm just surprised." She kept the news to herself for a week, trying to figure out how to tell Seo-Joon. Would he be happy? Worried? Would this make him more protective, more controlling? She knew his first instinct would be to wrap her in cotton wool and lock her away from anything remotely dangerous. The decision was taken out of her hands when she fainted during a meeting with potential investors. Seo-Joon caught her before she hit the floor, his face going white with panic as he gathered her into his arms. "Call the doctor!" he barked at Jae-won while checking her pulse. "Now!" Melissa's eyes fluttered open to find Seo-Joon's face inches from hers, stark fear etched into every line. "I'm okay," she mumbled. "Just stood up too fast." "You collapsed," he said, his voice shaking. "You're going to the hospital right now." "Seo-Joon, I'm fine. I know what's wrong." He froze. "You know? How long have you been sick? Why didn't you tell me?" "I'm not sick." She took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. "I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop. Seo-Joon stared at her, at his hand on her stomach, then back at her face. "Pregnant?" "About 6 weeks, according to the doctor I saw last week." She watched his expression carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. "I know we talked about waiting until things were more stable, but—" He kissed her, cutting off her nervous rambling with a kiss that was somehow tender and desperate all at once. When he pulled back, she was shocked to see tears in his eyes. "You're giving me a child," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "A family. Something I never thought I'd have, something I didn't even know I wanted until you walked into my life." His hand spread protectively over her stomach. "This is the best news you could ever give me." Relief flooded through her. "You're sure? Because our life is still dangerous and raising a child will be the greatest adventure we've ever had," he finished. "And yes, I'm sure. More sure than I've been about anything except marrying you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Seo-Joon's protective instincts went into overdrive. He hired a full-time obstetrician, installed panic buttons in every room, and absolutely refused to let Melissa anywhere near anything potentially dangerous. She tolerated it with good humor, understanding that this was how he expressed love, through control, through ensuring her safety at any cost. But 7 months in, danger found them anyway. Melissa was in the nursery they'd been preparing, hanging curtains with Sun-hee's help, when the first explosion rocked the estate. She hit the floor on instinct, her hands instinctively protecting her swollen belly as glass rained down around them. "Stay down!" Sun-hee screamed, covering Melissa's body with her own as a second explosion shook the walls. Through the ringing in her ears, Melissa heard gunfire, lots of it. Someone was attacking the estate in force, and Seo-Joon wasn't home. He'd gone to meet with their lawyers about the new business ventures. Wouldn't be back for another hour at least. She pulled her phone from her pocket, dialing Seo-Joon with shaking hands. He answered on the first ring. "Melissa, what's wrong?" "The estate is under attack," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm even as another explosion rocked the foundation. "Multiple breaches, heavy weapons. Seo-Joon, they're coming for me." "I'm 10 minutes away." His voice was pure ice and fury. "Get to the safe room now. Do-hyun and the others are fighting at the perimeter," she interrupted, having heard the distant sounds of battle. Seo-Joon, I don't think I can make it to the safe room. It's too far and I'm... She gasped as a contraction seized her belly, pain radiating through her body. Oh, God. What? Melissa, what is it? I think the baby's coming. Panic edged into her voice. It's too early. Seo-Joon, it's too early. She heard him shouting orders to someone, heard the squeal of tires as his car accelerated. Listen to me very carefully. Lock the nursery door. Barricade it with whatever you can move. I'm calling for backup, for medical, for everything. Just hold on, darling. Please hold on. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and Melissa couldn't hold back her cry of pain. Sun-hee was already moving furniture against the door, her face pale but determined. The next 15 minutes were a nightmare. Contractions came faster and harder, while the sounds of battle grew closer. Melissa heard men's voices in the hallway, heard the rattle of the locked door handle, heard the distinctive sound of someone setting up to blow the door. Then Seo-Joon's voice, absolutely deadly. Step away from that door or die where you stand. Gunfire erupted, brief and brutal, then silence. Melissa, open the door, darling. It's me. She stumbled to the door, shoving furniture aside with Sun-hee's help, and pulled it open to find Seo-Joon standing in a hallway littered with bodies, his gun still raised, his expensive suit splattered with blood. Behind him, Do-hyun and 5 other men secured the area. You came, she gasped, another contraction stealing her breath. Always. He caught her as her legs buckled, lifting her carefully into his arms. I'll always come for you. He looked at Do-hyun. Secure the perimeter. Kill anyone who doesn't surrender in the next 60 seconds. The baby's coming, Melissa panted against his chest as he carried her swiftly through the damaged estate. Seo-Joon, it's too early. I know. I've got you. His voice was soothing even as his body remained tense, ready for any threat. Medical team is waiting in the master bedroom. Best doctors in Seoul. You're going to be fine. You're both going to be fine. The next few hours blurred together. Pain, fear, Seo-Joon's steady presence beside her, and finally, impossibly, the sound of a baby crying. Their daughter was small but healthy, perfect despite arriving 5 weeks early. She's beautiful, Seo-Joon whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he held their daughter for the first time. Just like her mother. Melissa watched through exhausted tears as this dangerous, powerful man cradled their tiny daughter with infinite gentleness. What should we name her? Ji-woo, he said immediately. It means wisdom and protection. She'll need both growing up in our world. He looked up at Melissa, his eyes shining. Thank you for her, for you, for giving me a family when I thought I'd die alone and feared. We're in this together, she reminded him, reaching out to touch their daughter's impossibly small hand. Always. The attack, they later learned, had been Park Tae-yang's final play for power, a desperate, stupid attempt to eliminate Melissa and Seo-Joon's unborn child. He'd recruited malcontents from the old council network and launched a suicide mission against the estate. He died in the attack, along with 23 of his men. Not a single one of Seo-Joon's people had been killed, though several were injured. And Park's death sent a final, unambiguous message to anyone still considering opposition. The Kangs were untouchable. Ji-woo's first month of life was peaceful, in ways Melissa had never imagined possible in their world. Seo-Joon took time off from the business, something unheard of for someone in his position, to be with his family. He changed diapers, walked the floors during midnight feedings, and stared at their daughter with such profound love, it made Melissa's heart ache. You're a natural, she told him one night, watching him rock Ji-woo back to sleep with practiced ease. I had good motivation to learn, he replied, his voice soft to avoid waking the baby. Besides, I spent years learning how to kill people efficiently. Figuring out how to keep a tiny human alive is much more rewarding. When Ji-woo was 3 months old, Seo-Joon surprised Melissa with a trip back to Jeju Island, to the same beach where they'd held their second wedding. They walked along the shore at sunset, Ji-woo sleeping peacefully in a carrier against Seo-Joon's chest. "I've been thinking," he said, taking Melissa's hand as waves lapped at their feet, "about legacy, about what we're building. And I want more children," he admitted. "I want Ji-woo to have siblings, to grow up in a family. I want Sunday dinners and birthday parties and all the normal things I never had." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I want to give our children the childhood we didn't get." Melissa felt tears prick her eyes. "That sounds perfect." "There's more." He shifted Ji-woo carefully and pulled a folded document from his pocket. "I've been working with the lawyers. We're establishing a legitimate business empire. Real estate, technology, private security, investments, everything legal, everything clean. The old operations will continue, but separately, insulated, so that when Ji-woo is old enough to choose, she can take over something that won't get her killed." Seo-Joon. Melissa took the document, scanning the pages with growing amazement. He'd thought of everything: trusts, foundations, corporate structures that would allow their children to inherit wealth and power without inheriting the danger. "This is incredible. It's what you deserve, what our daughter deserves." He cupped her face tenderly. "You changed me, Melissa. Made me want to be better than I was. Made me believe I could be more than just a criminal with power." "You were always more than that," she insisted, covering his hand with hers. "You just needed someone to see it." They kissed as the sun set behind them, their daughter sleeping peacefully between their joined bodies. And Melissa understood that this was the happy ending she'd never dared to dream of. Not perfect, not without complications, but real and hard-won, and absolutely theirs. 5 years later, the Kang family had grown to include Ji-woo and her younger brother, Min-jun, a 3-year-old terror who'd inherited his father's determination and his mother's strategic mind. The legitimate business empire Seo-Joon had built now rivaled the old criminal operations in profitability, and whispers were that he'd go completely legal within the next decade. Melissa stood in their home, a new one, modern and bright, far from the fortress-like estate where they'd weathered so many storms, and watched her children play in the garden. Seo-Joon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he murmured. "Deliriously," she confirmed, leaning back against his solid warmth. "Though I sometimes miss the excitement of the old days." He laughed. "Speak for yourself. I get all the excitement I need watching our son try to climb trees that are too tall and our daughter manipulate the household staff into letting her stay up past bedtime." "She gets that from you." "She gets everything good from you," he countered, turning her in his arms to face him. "Her kindness, her intelligence, her ability to wrap me completely around her finger." "That last one is definitely from you," Melissa teased, rising on her toes to kiss him. They'd been through hell together, violence, betrayal, danger that should have destroyed them, but somehow, impossibly, they'd emerged stronger, built a family, created a legacy, proved that love could exist even in the darkest corners of the world. "I love you," Seo-Joon said, the words as fervent as a prayer. "Every day, more than the day before." "I love you too," Melissa replied, her heart full to bursting. "My king." "My queen," he whispered back and kissed her as their children's laughter filled the air and the sun painted everything gold. They'd started with a forced marriage and mutual suspicion. They'd built an empire together, fought wars side by side, and transformed darkness into light through sheer force of will and unwavering devotion. And in the end, love had conquered everything: fear, violence, the past, and all the forces that had tried to tear them apart. Some fairy tales end with happily ever after. Theirs began with it.